Thank you very much. So some of you know me. Usually I give presentations that are kind of technical, existence proofs in games, or a lot of data. Today I'm not gonna do any of this. I discussed a short opinion piece that I wrote a few weeks ago that turns out to be very topical because it's really about this tension between the more cypherpunk view of crypto blockchain and the more like finance, suit and tie type of view. Because as you know, everything that, and it's very much connected with everything that Quintus said, because all those problems, issues, everything we observe, essentially come from design decision done by the Ethereum Foundation, whether like an L1 layer or an L2 layer. And this design decision come from the preference and ideas of the people that are developing those projects. And in some sense, if we want to understand why we got where we are and how we can change that, in some sense we have to put ourselves in the spirit of thinking, okay, what is the underlying logic that brought them to choose this versus something else? Okay. Now, the piece I wrote starts with a fairly basic observation that says that our industry is one where network effects are very important. Now, network effects emerge whenever using a product or using a service becomes more valuable the more other people also use this service. Now, there are many canonical examples like technology standards, technological standards, social networks, payment platforms, you name it, like dating websites. Essentially, many existing services and products have this feature, and all of them have the basic problem of saying, okay, how do I move out from the low adoption equilibrium and bootstrap the network so that I achieve the high adoption equilibrium, also known as how do I solve the chicken and egg problem. Anyone who has tried to build a product in crypto is well aware of the importance of this problem. You can have the best technology ever, you can be quantum secure, I don't know, like faster, whatever. If nobody's using your product, nobody's gonna use your product, and this is gonna be a self-fulfilling loop that makes you stuck in the low adoption equilibrium. Now, in a sense, everybody working in the industry is very aware of network effect, their importance, why we need to think about them, and we see that on the pretty much ubiquitous, okay, because everywhere is giving out incentives to kickstart their network. Any new chain, any new DEX, they just throw people money in the hope that this will attract people that will eventually stay after the incentives run out, and therefore to bring the whole network to this famous high adoption equilibrium. Now, my piece was about the fact that, in a sense, and a bit surprisingly, the importance of network effect in the context of crypto stops at the provision of incentives. And my point is instead that if you look at historical example, we should consider this network effect also in the construction of the product. Okay, it should really inform us how we think about the product itself. Now, a case in point that is perhaps not related and actually came up later in the last few days is the relationship between an L1 and L2. Okay, now there's a lot of discussion of Ethereum economic zone versus this based rollup or recurrent system. Now, if you take the framework of putting the network effect at the center, the question you have to ask yourself in evaluating different frameworks that one could have of this relationship between L1 and 2 is an additional user on base making increasing the value of starting using Ethereum. Is this the case under the current model? I would argue probably not. But it's still a test that one can run on, like a thought experiment one can do on every possible model L1 and 2 relationship to try to identify the one that really brings more value to Ethereum. But in this piece, I was really focusing on this tension between cyberpunk and finance, and I was using the example of Facebook to illustrate one important point, which is how you can bootstrap a network in the way you are building your product. Now, when Facebook launched, it was open only to students at Harvard. Okay? Essentially, you need to have a harvard.edu email if you want to sign up there. Now, clearly, this was not a technological constraint. Okay? It was a choice because the people there realized that it was much easier to achieve critical mass among the niche that was Harvard students than to launch a totally open network where anybody could join and hope to achieve critical mass there. To say it differently, for them it was easier to go on campus and try to sign up people enough that other people at Harvard wanted to join, okay, than to do the global thing immediately. And the way they proceeded was exactly this niche by niche approach. Bootstrap the network at Harvard, once you achieve high adoption there, move to another university, achieve high adoption there, move to another university, and so on and so forth. And this niche by niche approach to achieve high adoption is a pattern that we find in many other examples, from Airbnb to whatever. And I was like, okay, what does this teach us for the way we build crypto application and one and two, whatever? Well, if the idea is that we want to first focus on a high value niche, conquer that, and then move to other niches, it seems to me to indicate that we should start by putting finance at the core right now, achieve critical mass there, and then move to other use cases, other niches that we might identify down the road. So it was really about pushing about L1 and 2, or other player in the infrastructure layer, to be more strongly thinking about finance as the main use case to build the infrastructure, not because that's the end game, not at all, but just because that's easier to achieve critical mass there, and then that is going to be another niche, another niche, another niche, another niche, okay? And what could that be? These things that make an infrastructure very good for finance. Well, one will be stronger guarantee of inclusion. We have a paper with Babu we're going to present in 2 days at the main conference where we show that in fact a lot of transactions are delayed because builders, for example, they leave them out because of latency, whatever. Therefore, one way you could make Ethereum or any chain better for finance is to put stronger inclusion guarantees. This is already somewhat happening as a theme. For example, forcing will be one way in which Ethereum guarantees some inclusion. I think putting Oracle updates at the top of the block should be discussed and proposed and put out as an idea. Oracle updates can be easily identified as a type of transaction because they don't consume any compute. You're not calculating anything, you're just writing. You can say that it's this special transaction that only writes, and we have this additional rule on the validity of a block that says this transaction on top of the block. This is obviously for finance, prop AMM, but one can think of other type of AMM like regular AMM that define slippage based on the Oracle price, so they're somewhat Oracle aware. And there are also reasons that could be, I think this can also be defended from first principle. The chain is always going to be slower than real life. Things move faster in real life, but the chain is not in a vacuum. So what happens in the rest of the world also matters for the actors on chain. So the idea that you want to start the block with just updating about what has happened in the meantime in the real life, and then do the rest of the execution makes sense, but obviously it's primarily for finance. And then there are, in the article I describe other things, how you could do maybe batch auction on chain, but this requires different rules of batch ordering. But in general it was a call to be a bit more forceful, so to be a bit more, to be a bit less shy about building for finance. I don't think that's again the cypherpunk ethos, it's just the next phase, knowing that the cypherpunk about digital identity, NFT, whatever, is going to come later once we have enough critical mass of people on chain. Yes, that's it.
Questions?
Please.
So are you proposing that we just have a simple transaction type that allows you to update storage lots?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the rule will be that it goes on the top of the block. Now, the other question would be, can a single but prominent builder adopt this rule? Well, I think if one could study that as a problem, you could say, if say Python, you say like BuilderNet as a group decides that they have a way to identify Oracle updates, and there are always going to be blocks in which this type And I can then launch an AMM that is aware of the Oracle price, defines slippage based on that. I need a way to know whether the block is built by BuilderNet, but that I can do. And then I can say, okay, I only trade if the block is built by BuilderNet, because I'm going to use the Oracle price to define my slippage, and otherwise I don't trade with anyone else. But there is a whole set of like DeFi applications that are essentially going to be active only if BuilderNet today, or maybe Titan is also going to do it. So I think it makes sense also to explore it as a from the point of view of the builder. But yeah, the idea would be that I mean, kind of first best would be if this was enshrined as an Ethereum protocol.
Oh, for context, we actually are working on a standard for that with some other partners.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm curious, actually, for the Dromos lab, Aerodrome, Velodrome, or whatever that cluster, what your view is on this perspective, that we should be like finance first on infrastructure, especially since you guys have chosen to deploy on more like neutral infrastructure.
Yeah. So what do you mean exactly? Like, should the what is my opinion on should the chain be
Finance first, and what does that mean? And I guess how is it? Have you thought about that in your past decisions and where to deploy?
Yes. I'd say that like over time, as all the juice gets squeezed and all the optimization occurs with regards to interacting with smart contracts, eventually it becomes more clear that like the architecture of the chain is a bottleneck of how many improvements you can make. So like right now it's like, okay, if we run a smart contract system that has, you call it passive LPs, but maybe the median date time for our LPs is like 3 or 4 blocks or whatever on a 2-second bookie stack chain. And so as this gets more competitive, then over time it becomes clear that the chain architecture or the block builder level is kind of the bottleneck of like how profitable LPs can be, how good the execution delivered to the users is.
Yeah, so let me just say, I think in a sense, we got to this point due to a very, perhaps extreme, let's say, interpretation of what neutrality means, which was like, we do not want to do anything that might look like we have a preferred use case. Okay? Whereas neutrality, more as an internet sense, is more about, we don't want to do anything that favors this specific application, this specific AMM or this specific DEX aggregator. Now, I definitely think that there shouldn't be a kind of a pick and choose approach where we like this AMM, we like that. But in terms of use cases, I think we might want to define phases in which first, okay, now we do more for finance, because that's where users are going to come, and then move to other use cases later on. Yes?
Do you have specific data on difficulties that Oracle updates are having getting inclusion? Like,
So inclusion is the thing, but inclusion on top of the block, I mean, it just never happens, I think, because the most valuable thing is always to put the arbitrage transaction on top of the block. I mean, it happens in Solana because they have a different way to calculate. I mean, at least the what's the name of their main builder? Yeah, the BAM. Yeah, exactly. So they have this rule that says that it's not just gas; it's gas per computing unit of computation.
Right, but
So that boils down to something similar to putting Oracle update first.
if there's value to the Oracle updates being first, builder algorithms are generally going to find that, correct?
It depends to whom accrues this value.
It's already sold it. The Oracle's already sold the data.
So I didn't understand.
The Oracle has already sold it.
Has already sold it.
Yeah.
But okay, in the context of liquidation, when there is the but I mean in general you could think that if a value of having Oracle update earlier is that I can have regular AMM that are price aware. In that case, the value will accrue to the passive LPs that are putting this in. And those guys are not going to be paying the builder.
I was just wondering if you had any specific data about how much of an issue that actually is. Like, are there Oracle updates now that are not top of block that want to be there?
Yeah.
It's more like a Solana versus other chain, I guess. So it's not necessarily super scientific, but in Solana, some builders use this rule in a way that is a bit like unintentional. They rank everything by feet per computing unit. I don't think they have a theory of that. Turns out that because Oracle update consume much less computing units than a swap, then essentially it's very cheap for whoever updates the Oracle to create a transaction before the arbitrage transaction, versus the more Ethereum, but okay, everyone else, where it's more by transaction fee, in which case it's really who's willing to pay the most, and then it's always the arbitrage transaction that wins. Okay, it's just the data will be the emergence of new type of AMM on Solana that we have not seen in other chains.
On Solana, props can also penalize swaps by artificially increasing the CU to make it uneconomical to land above the Oracle update in the slot.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Maybe a party over here, but we just someone from the EF making a bunch of comments here. First of all, I mean, the EF currently recently received a new mandate and everything, which I think will basically make the EF direction be a bit of a pushback against the floating finance first. It's not the direction that at least the EF is currently going. Not sort of valuing it, just saying that this will be an issue. The second thing that I'm a bit concerned about, maybe a bit of a technical, maybe we can sort of take this offline, is I don't quite see how when, if you go for a solution that basically you force via some kind of either consensus rules or via basically maybe roving in the current existing builders to put sort of Oracle transactions or the transactions that only ride part of the block. There's two issues here in that, first of all, there's some future or planned upgrades to the Ethereum roadmap that also sort of interact with the way transactions are ordered and that might be in conflict with that. So you're basically sort of in a competition to others sort of ordering the rules. That's one thing. The other thing is that if you sort of leave it up to the builder, then basically AMM basically needs a signal, as you said, basically which builder has sort of done that, and AMM has to trust the builder to do so. So there's a trust aspect here. And one danger, I think, I don't quite see how an AMM can actually reliably detect which builder actually built the current block is running in a way that sort of survives reorgs.
Okay.
That's
So there's a lot more research to be done. I think it's fair to say. But with respect to the mandate, my personal opinion is that if the mandate is interpreted as a long-term goal, I see no conflict with respect to saying, you know what, even if we think of digital identity as the coolest thing that we can do, we still need user on chain to make the whole thing valuable. And how do we get user? Well, the most immediate use case for the moment is finance. So as a period in the evolution of the system, I don't see any conflict. Of course, if instead the idea is that this is the future and also tomorrow, obviously there would be a conflict there. And with respect to all the other technical aspects, I fully agree. There could be other ordering rules that need to have somewhat be made compatible with what I was discussing. All point well taken. It needs a deeper discussion.